Chapter 8, Friedrich. Wanyenyekevu was excited to meet someone knowledgeable about history, and spoke with confidence, saying, "One of my ancestors was Irish and many looking for work served as overseers during slavery. Some were kind and gentle and some were not. But my ancestor left that entire market during what they have called, the Devil's Punch Bowl. Where 20,000 black men during the Civil War were murdered in a mass grave, a horrendous crime they tried to hide from history." Friedrich shook his head. "Yes, even as you speak I'm reminded that even after the Civil War, most horse trainers, grooms, and jockeys were our people in a sport, back then, called the Kentucky Derby. In fact, of the 28 winning jockeys of the first Kentucky Derby, 15 of them were our people. However, we were banned from the sport, once the Jim Crow era began. But about 80 years later, we produced men like Marlon St. Julian, Kevin Krieger, and Oliver Lewis. Old Oliver Lewis was born into slavery but won first place in the inaugural Kentucky Derby of 1875. There was a young man." Friedrich paused. "Damn, his name is at the tip of my tongue. Soup, that was his name." At 15, James "Soup" Perkins became one of the youngest jockeys to win the Kentucky Derby, and another man, Isaac Burns Murphy, was known as one of the best jockeys to ever race. Yes, we all heard of Meghan Markle, but she was not the first black woman to become a member of the British royal family, as if it matters, but Queen Sophie Charlotte, the wife of King George III, was. Wanyenyekevu, smiling in agreement, "Yes, I have heard of those, but did you know that during slavery, there were a series of revolts and rebellions by slaves against their masters? In Britain, they ended the British slave trade in 1807, through Parliament, but it wasn't the end of slavery itself. It wasn't a provision to free those who were already enslaved. At the same time, slavery persisted, especially in the Caribbean. The act only made the buying and selling slaves from British ships illegal. However, the slaves in Barbados thought it freed them, but they weren't, causing the Barbados Revolt of 1816. Wanyenyekevu smiled. "I never been to Africa or any place other than Louisiana, until now, so I speak about my history and what comes close to home, and I see that you on an international level, and that's different for me. I might know it, but it sounds different from someone who more." Friedrich politely interrupted Wanyenyekevu. "That's precisely it, because I never heard of this Devil's Punch Bowl. African history is, as you say, hit closely to home than American slavery." Wanyenyekevu smiled. "That makes sense. Well, we can definitely learn what's missing in both of our understanding of them both." Friedrich shook his head. "Yes, we can. Please continue." Wanyenyekevu smiled. "Okay, well, it was rare for our people to have control over an enormous amount of land. However, Reverend Isaac Simmons, from Amite County, Mississippi, owned over 270 acres of debt-free land. His family worked the land, produced crops, and sold the wood off the land. A rumor was started that there was oil on his land, and a group of white men showed up on Simmons' land and warned him to stop cutting lumber. Knowing what was about to happen, Mr. Simmons consulted with a lawyer, a man who practices law, to work out the dispute and ensure that the property would belong to his children in the event of his death. Later, the men kidnapped and shot Simmons 3 times, cut out his tongue, and gave the rest of the family 10 days to get off the land. Like always, an all-white jury acquitted them, and they successfully stole his land." Friedrich paused. "But it's especially sad when your own people, whether or not flesh and blood, betray you. That's something that cuts worse than a knife can ever do. Whether for money, power, or position, it doesn't matter. Selling out your own is the worst kind of betrayal, and justice must be taken to heal that pain, to bring about peace. And these demons are doing far worse than we as a people have ever encountered. I've seen what they were doing to our people, and it is excruciating to see the cruelty." Wanyenyekevu said. "I like you, a man after my own heart, who loves Sabaoth and knows a little about history.